So welcome everyone. This is a special day where we will be speaking, we will be understanding the concept of yoga and yoga for children. I formally welcome on behalf of Zena family to all the participants who are here. We are eager to learn, we are eager to contribute, and that's what make Zena family unique. So one clap for all of you who have taken out some time from your busy life and have planned to be here. So one clap for all of you. Without we being here present, this event is nothing. Of course, we are going live. We will be sharing this video later on to people who can view this. View this. However, what's a fun is being live with the speaker. If you have some questions, you can answer. You can ask them questions, and you get ready quick answers for your questions. So a little bit about how the event will go. We'll have a keynote speaker. She's very special. In a moment, I will introduce keynote speaker to us. We have very dynamic Atul Sinha ji will be taking our main session, and we will have question answer after that. So we will begin the today event with a vision video. May I request Nandita ji to please play vision video for Zena. Is it with sound, Nandita? I can't hear at least.
I'm very sorry. I was on mute, so I'm playing it again.
Zena World Vision Document. We are a family bringing joy, happiness, prosperity in our lives and around by nurturing, encouraging, catalyzing, enabling 360-degree well-being in physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and economic dimensions. Our vision: abundance of joy, happiness, care, and prosperity for all. Our mission: we strive for alleviating pain, suffering, and poverty, encouraging unshackled-free thoughts, enabling dignified jobs and livelihood, nurturing close family bonding, seeking joy and happiness in the impact caused. Our values: passion, work with passion and from heart. Our values: humility, learning attitude, mutual respect, and open to listening to others. Our values: integrity, sincere, honest, and ethical principles. Our values: values empathy, understand and feel others as your own. Our values humanity, have compassion, brotherhood, fellow feeling, and kindness. Our values joy, work that brings joy and value, diversity and inclusion. Our character trust, belief, faith, and confidence in self and in others, from where love and compassion emanate. Our character, virtue, high moral values, patience, consideration, trustworthiness, and forgiveness. Our character, transparency, honesty, openness, and not guarded. Thank you.
Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Nandita. That was very inspiring, and in a very nutshell, it has briefed about the purpose, why we are together, and why we are doing what we are doing. Today's topic is on yoga. Yoga adds years to our life and life to our years. Any doubt on that? Satulji is nodding his head. That is so true. We are very lucky that in such an interesting topic we have very young keynote speaker. She is going to speak to us about yoga for kids. It helps kids to relax. It helps live our life better. Our keynote speaker is none other than very young, dynamic Shana Bhattacharya. Can you imagine a 7th-year girl going to speak to us about such an interesting topic, which is life-changing? She has a lot of interest in technology. She has knowledge in the field of yoga, in spiritual world. She has attended many courses, which has helped her personally in life through yoga. She likes to deal with benefits of spiritual world and yoga for kids also. So she's already active with kids, and her hobbies include art, creation, reading storybook. So may I present Shana Bhattacharya to all of us to take our keynote session. Welcome, Shana. Over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Shana and thank you Jainsha auntie for introducing me so well.
My pleasure.
So now I shall start with my keynote address. Can anyone confirm to me if my screen is visible?
Yes, it is.
So let me start with it. I'm honored for having been entrusted with the responsibility of delivering today's keynote and welcome address. It's a true reflection of the objective of this foundation, where care for children is specifically mentioned. I'm here in front of you only because of the foundation has faith in young people like me. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. I'm here because I choose to live by choice, not by chance, to make changes, not excuses, to be motivated, not manipulated, to be useful, not used, to excel, not compete. I choose self-esteem, not self-pity. I choose to listen to my inner voice, not the random opinions of others. Objectives of Zana World Care Foundation: to look after the welfare of dependent children and senior citizens of Zana family members. Introducing our host, Jainsha. Jainsha is a business consultant and financial strategist. She's helping startups, small to medium family, run businesses to generate growth and profits by redesigning their financial strategy. As a founder of Zone CFO, she helps businesses manage their entire financial functions by acting as their outsourced CFO. She is immensely passionate about financial literacy and freedom for women, and regularly appears on television and other media platforms, sharing her vision and experience. Benefits of yoga for children keynote address. Let me start with it now. Our host for today is Jane Shah. Keynote myself, Shana Bhattacharya. Speaker Atul Sinha. Vote of thanks Dr. Nandita Sethi. And Q&A moderator Abhilasha. So let me now start with what I am here to present to you today. Number one, keep it positive. Helping your children develop a positive attitude can greatly contribute to their well-being throughout their lives and help them build resilience. Tell kids what they can do, not what they can't, and celebrate successes. Sometimes you might see that keeping things positive results in positivity too. Positivity is always appreciated. So let's try keeping things positive instead of thinking negative of a particular matter. Number two, make meals a colorful collage. Filling a plate with brightly colored foods translates into health benefits and nutritional value, especially when the items are in season. Think red apples, blue and purple, eggplant and grapes, green beans, yellow and orange, carrots and squash, and white cauliflower. Sometimes colorful things brighten up our moods. So if we keep the meals in a colorful way, it might result in making the subsequent matter brightened up. Number three, eat healthy breakfast. Eating a balanced breakfast with protein is a good way for your child to start the day. Try hard-boiled eggs, toast in an apple, almond butter on whole grain toast, or Greek yogurt. These were just some examples. You can try any other food or breakfast with protein also. Not only this much, there are more food which can strengthen you. Healthy breakfast is good for you to start the day. Number four, enjoy physical activities. Expose your kids to a range of physical activities, from swimming to hiking, and enjoy them together as a family. Every child is different, so there's bound to be something they'll enjoy. Children, as you may see, are very different from the other children of their age. In simpler words, every child is unique. Similarly, every child has unique ways of doing fun. Number five, kids and teens age 8 to 18 spend an average of more than 7 hours a day looking at screens. The new warning from the AHA recommends parents limit screen time for kids to a maximum of just 2 hours per day. For younger children aged 2 to 5, the recommended limit is 1 hour per day. Now we know the recommended times, but how to make the cut? With screens everywhere, it may seem even harder to cut down on a child's time with them. But limits are worth it. Try these tips I'm sharing with you to pry them off those devices, at least for a little while. Number one, don't give your kids their own tablet or smartphone. Interact with your children. Do that instead of handing them an electronic device. Number two, make computers and TVs stay in the shared spaces of your home. When your kids use screen in the kitchen or maybe a living room, it's easier to keep an eye on them and scold them on overuse of devices. Nowadays, as we know, online classes are necessary. But some people, even after the online classes, give their children mobile phones, either to play games or to scroll down information, which is harmful for them. So as per recommended times, we must go on giving children devices. Now let's talk about our event today. Introducing yoga to your children helps establish healthy habits at an early age. Yoga can enhance your child's strength, coordination, and flexibility. While encouraging body awareness and self-esteem, it can reduce your child's anxiety and stress and promote them a sense of calmness. On behalf of Dr. Ankita Singh, President Zana World Care Foundation, and all its esteemed members of the foundation, we heartily welcome everyone present today. We hope you'll enjoy the session as it unfolds. Thank you. Thank you and hope you'll enjoy the session ahead.
Wasn't that wonderful? She deserves a huge round of applause. Shana, this is for you. You did a fantastic opening to the event and you have set the mood for the day. And, I'm really looking forward now to the main session. Next speaker with us is really amazing. When I read his bio, I was personally inspired reading by it. And Tulji, I can see two Buddhas behind you. What a coincidence. At my place also, I have similar kind of painting with one Buddha. So no wonder I am happy that I got a chance to introduce you. As Atul Sinha, he's Atul Sinha. He says, if you define destiny, it will grab you by the scruff of your neck and throw you on its intended path. After a long inning in the corporate world, ending up as a vice president, marketing at Britannia, Atul Sinha was slow to read the message destiny was sending out to him. But finally, he had to surrender to its demand. He left Britannia, set up leading brand design company, and parallelly enrolled for a PhD program in yoga at Swayasha University in Bangalore. He immersed himself in the study of ancient knowledge of Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, Indian philosophical system, yoga, and ancient Indian education. This specific area of research was integrating yoga with children's education. He extensively studied both ancient knowledge and modern research on yoga and developed a theoretical model of yoga in education. Noticing that the barrier of implementing yoga in school were time and resource constraint, he developed a short duration classroom yoga module. His module was subjected to a large-scale successful empirical study, which formed his PhD thesis. Atul grew up and went to school in Jamshedpur, studied economics in SRCC Delhi University, and completed an MBA from XLRI. He has worked with Voltas, Cadbury, Colgate, and Britannia. He now lives in Bangalore with his wife Gunjan, a former creative director with Sachi and Sachi. His daughter Sanya, also an economic graduate from a postgraduate degree in development study, is a market research professional based in Singapore. What a dynamic personality and well-studied human being is going to take our session. So now over to you, Atul Sinha ji, for next round of information session for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is my share screen activated?
Everybody can share, I think. Just see if it is green
No,
color.
no, it says host disabled participants screen sharing. So you have to do something. Rajiv has to do something.
Probably you can make him co-host.
So I can move the host to you, but then I cannot monitor from here. So that's
You-
okay. I'm already,
You can make him co-host.
I think there's no co-host here, but I'll
Okay.
make him the host for some time
Fine.
being. Just a second. I'll give him presenter rights at least. Just a second. 1 second. Okay, you made the host.
No, it's still disabled.
Yeah, it's
So
coming.
you are host now. Sorry. Yeah, I can do it now. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes.
It is. All right, great. Okay. Uh, so what I've done is I have broadened the topic a little. So in this presentation, there will be large sections which talk to the benefits of yoga for children, and Shana has covered a lot of it. She has got the crux of it, right? But what I'm going to add to that is how yoga can be taken to school. What is compelling educationists to suggest that yoga should be taken to school, and what are the barriers to it, and how we can take it to school. So this subject will broaden a little bit. If we take yoga to schools, then all children will practice yoga, which is much more effective than one person being motivated and getting their son or daughter to do it. Okay? There's some disturbance coming. Can you take care of that?
Uh, Kindly, everybody, please
Yeah.
make sure you are on mute, please.
Yeah.
I don't have host rights right now, so everybody, please put yourself on. Seema, can you just put yourself on mute? Just a second. Let me just check up once.
Tulsi, will you please mute everyone because we,
Yeah. Okay.
probably.
How do I do that? Tell me.
Okay, now they are on mute, so
You're on mute.
fine, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Because a small child will have no interest in this presentation and will continue to do its own thing, which is very good. Okay. Now what happens? Yeah. So this presentation is going to go into 5 sections. The first section covers why is there a need felt today to expand the goal of education to go beyond academic performance. The second section will flow from there, and we'll see why people are making a case for yoga in schools, both in the West as well as the traditional yoga masters in India. Then the third section will very briefly cover how yoga works. This is a subject by itself. Entire Patanjali Yoga Sutra is written on this subject, but very, very briefly, we'll just cover how yoga works. We're not going to great detail over here, but just to give you just a fleeting idea of how yoga works, which will help you understand the benefits of yoga for children. And finally, we'll go into how yoga can be taken to school, how can it be implemented. So this is the flow of the presentation. So let's start with, why is this? Let's start with the goals of education. So let's look at the great Swami Vivekananda. He's a man I never fails to inspire me. For anything in life, he'll have something to say. So he says education is the manifestation of perfection already in man. Can you think of a better definition of education? So we are a civilization which believes that life is spiritual. We are spiritual beings and not just our bodies. And as spiritual beings, we are perfect. But that perfection is hidden from us. And all education does is peels those layers of impurity so that the perfection shows through. There's nothing more that has to be done. What a beautiful definition of education. And this ties in very, very well with yoga. So let's look at both the traditional thinkers and the modern educationists. They agree that developing the mind, training the mind is the prime goal of education. So Vivekananda, who represents a traditional view, says, to me, the very essence of education is concentration of the mind, to develop concentration and not to cram it with facts, not to fill it with information, but to develop its concentration. And the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development in the USA, it is, I think, equivalent to NCERT in India. It has defined the goals of education, but intellectual and academic competence is its first goal. So both modern thinkers as well as traditional thinkers agree that developing the mind is the main goal of primary goal of education. However, there are factors which are driving people to say that we need to expand this goal. We have skewed too much towards academic performance, development of intelligence and cognitive development. And as a result, what has happened is we are creating some very, very serious problems for our children. One problem which is being created is a very, very high, you'll be shocked. I'll share the numbers with you in the next slide. The very high prevalence of mental health conditions amongst children. And the second is deteriorating character of our young people. So these are two factors which have got educationists woken up, shaken up, and looking at. So UNICEF says there are as many as 450 million children. Let that number sink in. 450 million children in the world who have a mental health problem. That means they're saying 1 in 5 kids in the world have a mental health problem. Let that point sink in. It's a huge number. Second, if you take the adult population, people over 21, and if you find that somebody with a mental health problem, 80% of such people, for 80% such people, the mental problem its origin can be traced to childhood. So the implication is that if you can either prevent or treat mental health issues of a child, you will have a healthier adult population. They'll grow up to be healthier adults. So the adult population which suffer from mental health will reduce dramatically. Now, you might say that India is a very spiritual country and we have a very strong family bonding, so we don't have this problem, but that's absolutely not true. Against 7.5% of children in the USA with a mental health problem, 7.3% is the National Mental Health Survey says that 7.3% of Indian children have a mental health problem. It's equal for boys and girls, slightly more in urban, less in rural, but it's the same number as the US. And this was done with all across the country with a small sample size, but specific studies with large sample sizes, like one done in Bangalore, 12.5%, one done in a district of Haryana, 21%, a district of Bengal, 33%, and one in Madurai, 37%. So let the number sink in. Like, it's closer to the UN estimate, and which is an underestimate of 1 in 5 kids have a mental health problem. What have we created? Then we come to character. So there is a gentleman called Thomas Licona, who's done a lot of work in this character field. And he says that deteriorating character is now a major concern. And he lists 10 trends which support his finding. There's a rising youth violence, dishonesty. There is disrespect for parents, teachers, and authority figures. There is peer cruelty. There are bigotry and hate crime. The language has deteriorated. The decline in work ethic, and increased self-centeredness and decline in civic responsibility and self-destructive behavior, premature sexual activity, substance abuse, suicide. I met a lady in Bangalore, Mrs. Hegde, who runs a child welfare outfit. And she told me that every month, the statistic is every month, one school child commits suicide in the state of Karnataka. It was unheard of when we were growing up. I mean, a child suicide was the rarest of rare, but now it's one a month in Karnataka. And there's growing ethical illiteracy. I mean, people don't understand what is ethics, what is right, what is wrong. They can't differentiate. And based on this, Licona has recommended that character education be made part of school curricula. It should be proactively taught. It should be, the ethical value should be promoted not only in behavior, but in thinking and feeling. Schools, he says, should become caring communities. Teachers should become role models. The student-teacher relationship needs to transform. And parents and community need to support the emphasis on character education along with academic excellence. So this is his recommendation, and you will see how his recommendation uncannily mirrors ancient Indian education, what we used to call the Gurukula system. So we have swerved very much towards just developing the mind and academic excellence, and this needs to be corrected. And recognizing this, the ASCD, the equivalent of NCERT in the US, they framed a definition of the whole child and said the whole child needs to be educated. So this definition, you can read it. It covers intellectual, it covers spoken, it covers emotional, empathetic, kind, caring, fair. It covers the creative side of development. It covers self-discipline and self-direction. And it covers confidence and the feeling that the child is cared for and valued. Advocacy for, and other people have also said they're advocating for what is called social emotional learning. Basically, to cut the jargon, it means to develop emotional resilience. So this developing emotional resilience has 5 dimensions. One is the child should be able to regulate his or her emotions and stress themselves, and self-awareness, which is to recognize his or her emotions and be aware of their impact on their behavior. And social awareness, which means appreciate other people's perspectives. And this is a problem you can see around you. Adults don't do that. So, and this is what we are modeling to our kids. And relationship skills, establish and maintain positive relationships. And responsible decision making, to make positive choices about what to behave when and how to interact socially. So what education is saying that this whole part has collapsed, which is leading to this mental health problem. And we need to bring it back. We need to do things which promote the development of emotional resilience. And there are people the same like Licona and others who advocate character education. And they say character education is required first for you to become fully human. And to be fully human, even that needs to be defined nowadays. It is to be empathetic, caring, good. It should have good judgment. It should have self-discipline and moral courage to be a good human being. And by pursuing character education in schools, you make schools a better place. School becomes a more caring environment. And if you're producing kids with good character, they will go on to make a more moral society. And UNESCO kind of agrees with that. They have also defined it that way. And they have also said that to achieve that, the teacher-student relationship, individualized learning, involvement of parents and community are critical. And you will see in the next few slides how this mirrors Indian. So we have Swami Vivekananda back again, and he says, we must have life-building, man-making, character-making assimilation of ideas. And the great Jiddu Krishnamurti, he is more blunt. He says, is education about preparing one to fit into a world gone mad with quarrels, bullying, tearing into each other? Teach one to observe, teach one to listen, and teach one to grow up as someone who cares, who has affection, who loves people. So the ancient Indian educationists have been saying this for thousands of years. Modern education, having gone off the track, is coming back and kind of agreeing with ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom. So with the goals, what were the goals of ancient Indian education? So one goal was to build character. It was a very, very important goal of ancient Indian education. And it rested on the fact that we are spiritual beings and we need to make progress spiritually. And to do that, we must have purity of thought. So that is what drove the emphasis to build character and to build personality, to build self-restraint so that you have self-control, self-respect so that, you're not buoyed by other people's thinking, feelings, and self-reliance and social efficacy. So people were trained not to be self-centered and to perform multiple duties when they grow up, as a spouse, as a parent, as a productive member of society. And these were taken as duties, right? And another very important thing was the preservation of heritage, which basically in those days meant transmission of Vedic knowledge. But you can see even today, it has persisted after so many years and so much of challenges, that respect for elders, respect for teachers, respect for saints is still ingrained in us. Okay, so what are the proposed goals of modern education from all this? So one is we saw development of concentration remains a primary goal, but the other two goals, developing emotional resilience and development of character, has come in. So this is now framed as a goal of education. So what is the case for yoga in education? We'll first look at how the Westerners are putting this case, and then we'll look at the traditional case. All right. So Bethany Butzer, she wrote a very good paper. And what research evidence of benefits of yoga and suggested that yoga is a very effective in promoting SEL, that is social emotional learning, the building emotional resilience. She studied in great detail and she said it's a very good expedient for building emotional resilience. And another group led by Waters, they studied school-based meditation program, transcendental meditation and other meditation, and showed that yoga positively impacted student well-being, social competence, and as well as improved grades. And Andrea Hyde, she made a fantastic argument. I mean, and it was in the US, and she said we shouldn't disbar yoga because it's culturally from a different land. And she said it will positively develop the whole child, which was defined by the NCERT equivalent in the US. Then these two ladies, Hagen and Nair, they wrote a paper and they said something very interesting, and much of it Shana has also said, is that there are four main challenges to kids today. One is globalization. Globalization is putting a lot of new standards and new pressures are being put. Second, the pressure to succeed. The world is becoming more and more competitive. And third, what Shana talked about is media distractions. It is really, really fragmenting attention. And linked to that is cyberbullying and inappropriate content on the internet. And she said that yoga, they said the yoga could contribute positively and therefore it should be introduced in schools. They said it enables children to listen inward, it improves their attention, self-esteem, and therefore pitched for yoga. The traditional case for yoga is well known. I'm quoting from Swami Satyananda, who started the Bihar School of Yoga. And they say that it leads to an integrated development of personality. That means it develops you physically, cognitively, emotionally, and at a personality level. Then very important, it says it balances prana shakti and manas shakti. That means mental energy and physical energy. Let's put it that way simply. So if you have very high physical energy and low mental energy, then you'll be hyperactive. So all the hyperactive kids, they have very high physical energy, low mental energy. So people say, go run, play football. So dissipate that physical energy. On the other hand, people who have high mental energy and low physical energy, they'll be depressed and lethargic. So it is basically, this needs to be balanced, and yoga balances this for overall psychological well-being, is what Swami Satyananda said. Then it says it improves concentration and cognitive performance and imagination. So therefore, both left brain, right brain improves. It, very importantly, he is one guy who was stressed on this. There's something called the pineal gland. It is located somewhere, between your forehead, and if you draw a straight line to the back of your head in the middle, a pineal gland, which starts, disintegrating around the age of 8 or 9. And when that happens, it stimulates the pituitary gland. And that is when, sexual maturation starts taking place in kids. Puberty for girls, menstruation starts at around that time. And by practicing yoga, he says, you can delay the decay of the pineal gland, so that all this happens not at the age of 8, 9, and 10, but like 12 and 13, when the child is more ready to handle this surge of feelings which is happening within himself or herself. So yoga has a very, very strong role to play over here. Then students and teachers practicing yoga together creates a very nice learning atmosphere in the classroom, and kind of synchronizes all the kids. The kids are coming from different attention levels. This calming down with yoga in the classroom helps them, to have a uniform attention. So this is said by Swami Satyananda, Swamini Yoga Bhakti, and Swami Niranjana. So here is Satyananda, and you can read this yogic vision. Yogic vision of education revolves around self-transformation. So only here we are talking about, education is about transforming yourself. And it says you cannot reform others unless you reform yourself. And as long as we run after the material things, there can be no salvation for individual or society. Solution lies in turning towards things spiritual. We are all Atmans, sparks of one divine soul, and yoga can help develop this vision. Look at the grand vision of what yoga says about education. Okay. Now this is not an easy section, so I will do it quite rudimentarily. If you feel interested, I can take another session to explain this in more detail. But this is the essence of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. I will just take, the yoga works in many ways. I will just talk about 5 things over here. All right. First is, what is a yogic understanding of the mind? So this big block in the center, which is the senses, mind, intellect, and egoism, is the mind complex as per yoga. All right. And we need to understand how the mind works. And the consciousness right on top, outside the box, is what we understand as Atman. All right. So the senses are your, hearing, your sight, your smell, touch. These senses are outgoing. So they're always getting entangled with objects outside. So right now you're entangled with your computer screen, right? So they're always outgoing, and what they do is the sense gets a signal of the object and passes the signal on to the mind. Now, the mind and intellect in the yogic understanding is separated. They're 2 different faculties. The mind is just a post office. So it gets thoughts, it's swarming with thoughts, and it sends the thought to the intellect. And it is the seat of impulses, emotions, likes, dislikes. So the mind is the more emotional aspect, more impulsive aspect, more childish, so to say. It's the intellect which is it has a discriminating facility. So it can say what is good, what is bad. It can decide, it's decisive. It can decide, okay, now we should take this action, we should avoid this thing, or go and grab this thing. So intellect is a decider. So the senses get signals of the objects, send it to the mind then transfers it to the intellect. But the intellect, mind, and senses are jada. That means they are material. They are not alive. They don't have intelligence. So how does intelligence come? So once the intellect gets the signal of the object, consciousness, that is Atman throws light on it. So the signal of the object is reflecting in the intellect, and the consciousness throws light on it. And with that light, this knowledge gets enlightened. So you get the knowledge of, suppose the object was a rose. This is how you know it's a rose. So get this, you never see a rose, you always see a signal of the rose. You always see a photograph of the rose. Get this, is very, very important. And once the consciousness lights up the object in the intellect, there's a sense that, I am seeing this rose. So that egoism, ahamkara is, so this whole thing is called chitta, the mind complex. Senses, mind, intellect, and egoism. And the consciousness is hatke ye sab se, and it only lights the object. Now, what is, from all this great metaphysics, what is the psychology? What is the thing? What is it for kids and for ourselves? Is a rapid thought activity or uncontrolled senses lead to a disturbed mind. So you will find many people who are very impulsive. Their senses are always going out. They're on the street and they see one puchka shop and say, I want to have a puchka, or I want to have ice cream. So, they're always outgoing, and, their senses are uncontrolled, and senses are uncontrolled. There are a lot of traffic of signals getting into their mind, and the mind is disturbed. The mind is not able to concentrate. And what yoga does, it calms the senses down, it slows down the mind and improves concentration. So there's a very, very particular reason why yoga calms down the mind and what is the benefit of a calm mind. Then we go into the personality. Now, the yogic idea is that we have 5 layers in our personality. So we only see the body and perhaps sense the mind, but there's a body, and then there's this energy sheath, pranic energy. So there's pranic energy all over the universe, everywhere. We imbibe it, and that is what, when I'm moving my hands, it's pranic energy which is moving my hand. When you breathe in and out, it's pranic energy which is making you breathe in and out. So when a person dies, prana leaves the body. That's why it's a pran chala gaya. Prana leaves the body, so then there's no movement. Prana is movement. So that's the energy sheath. Then we discuss the mind. Mind is a seat of emotions and impulses. And then you have the intellectual sheath, which is the buddhi, which is a discriminating faculty. And last of all, deep inside, you have got the bliss sheath. So when everything else stops, then what you have is just ecstasy, just joy. So every time you enjoy something, you pop a rasgulla, for example, and you enjoy the rasgulla, your intellect mind stops. You don't know it, you don't think about it, but at that moment, when you get that enjoyment, it just stops. And you're so absorbed in that rasgulla, your mind stops and the bliss sheath comes into play. So what is again, the implication of this knowledge? He says, when the mind dominates, impulsive behavior, unregulated emotions result. And with yoga, when you calm the mind down, calm the senses down, it shifts to intellect consciousness, and it results in very thoughtful behavior. Now, there are 3 universal energies. These energies exist everywhere. You might have heard this term, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So basically, sattva is the energy which is it's illuminative energy. It is what makes you tranquil, what makes you shant, what makes you, empathetic, loving. So it's that energy. Rajas is the energy of passion and activity. And tamas is the energy of lethargy and dullness and heedlessness. There are some people who are heedless. They take some action and they're heedless about the consequence. They are coming from tamas. So these three energies are there in all of us in different proportions. And when rajas and tamas dominate, then there are imbalances in the personality. When sattva dominates, one is calm and controlled. What does yoga do? It increases sattva and reduces rajas and tamas. Second last, I just want to talk about the 5 mental planes. So the normal mental plane is when we are influenced by rajas, we are active and disturbed. And when we are influenced by tamas, we are inactive and dull. Or we fluctuate between rajas and tamas, so we fluctuate between activity and dullness. So this is on the left column is the normally what people are, we are. But when you do yoga, then you start moving in this direction. When you do yoga, sattva increases, rajas, tamas reduce. When that happens, then you become one-pointed. That means you can focus on one thing and everything else is out. Your mind is not disturbed. You can concentrate. And when you become an advanced yogi, then you get into a meditative state, which is the 5th plane, mental plane. So your mental planes are rajas domination, tamas domination, combination of rajas, tamas, sattva domination, and samadhi. Finally, the left and the right brain. So, as you know, the left brain is aggressive, it is active, it is logical, analytical, argumentative. Those are characteristics of the left brain. And right brain is more passive, receptive, synthetical. It's more poetic and creative. So people also call this the male energy and the female energy. People they also call it the sun energy and the moon energy, the yin and the yang. So normally, again, we are either this or that. You hear people say, I'm very left brain. Some people say, I'm very right brain. So, but what yoga does, it balances the left and the right. So you are creative and logical at the same time. When you study something, you imbibe it from your full range of your mind. So this is what yoga does. Now, finally, we come to this Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, the sage of yoga, Patanjali, he came up with the 8 steps of yoga. So the first step, starting from Yama, and you go down clockwise. The Yama and Niyama are the disciplines and observances. These are meant for people to live their lives out of like that. If they live their lives like that, then they are calm, they are peaceful, they are good, they are pure, and they're ready for yoga. This is a preparation for yoga. And what are Yama and Niyama? So Saucha, cleanliness, Santosha, contentment, Tapas or discipline, Swadhyaya, self-study, and Ishwar Pranidhana, that means you do desireless action. So these are the Yamas. And Niyamas are Ahimsa, non-violence, Satya, truthfulness, Asthya, non-stealing, Brahmacharya, which is self-discipline, self-control, and Aparigraha, not coveting possessions of others. So if you follow this is very ancient. If you follow this, then you'll become a calm, strong person. Your personality will improve. Then you're ready for yoga. So now, many of us think yoga is only asanas, but this is it. And I'll explain each one to you. So asana works on the body. And what is the main purpose of asana? We talked about prana and the flow, prana energy in your body. So prana energy in your body flows through these subtle channels called nadis. There are 75,000 nadis in the human body. And if we don't practice it, if we live just a normal life of outward focused life, then these nadis get blocked. So what asana does is it opens up the nadis, it unblocks the nadis. And with that, you get flexibility, you get strength, you get fitness, your organs function properly because nadis are unblocked. And now prana is flowing everywhere. So the imbalance between your organs, between your kidney and your heart and your lung is all taken care of by this. So asana is done to unblock the nadis, and it gives you fitness and strength, and it steadies the body, stabilizes the body. Otherwise, the body is either restless or lazy. So it makes it, virile. The body is vital. That's what asana does. So once we have gone through a bit of asana, then we can do pranayama. Pranayama are breathing exercises, and it's not basically the air which you breathe, but the prana which you take in through the air, and you increase the pranic energy within your body, and you move the pranic energy from lower chakras to the higher chakras. So you become, more calm, more loving, your personality more cheerful, more courageous by doing this. Then the third step is pratyahara. Asana and pranayama itself, by doing that, pratyahara develops automatically. And there are certain very relaxation techniques which also develop pratyahara. Pratyahara basically is that you have the control over your senses. So it is basically controlling your mind by controlling your senses. So you have self-control over the sense. You can hold the reins of your senses yourself. You can determine whether senses are going out or coming in. So seamlessly, you are able to move out of yourself and go back and be contemplative. And that prepares you for meditation. The 3 steps of meditation are dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So now in meditation, there are 3 things involved. One is the Atman, the consciousness we talked about, which is the stream of consciousness flowing from the Atman. Second is the instrument, which is your mind, which is cognizing objects. And third is the object. So as you know, when you start doing meditation, people say, concentrate on this flower, concentrate on your breath, concentrate on Om. So what they're saying is concentrate on this one object. And, don't let other objects come in. So this developing that one pointed concentration through your own effort is called dharana. And once you become expert at dharana, it will automatically move to dhyana. You can't do it just like that. You can only do dharana. Dharana can, mature into dhyana. And what is dhyana? The object drops. So right now, you are saying, I'm concentrating on my breath. I'm concentrating on my breath. Then you're just concentrating. The object, the breath has gone. You're breathing, but you're not focusing on that. Or the rose has gone. The concentration is there. That is dhyana. And in samadhi, even the mind goes. Mind is gone. So only thing is that awareness of consciousness, which is what is called samadhi. The big yogis, the high yogis, they achieve that. So this is the 8 steps of Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga. All right. From here, we get into the benefits of yoga. So what I've done is I've divided into the domains, the physical domain, emotional domain, etc. And on the left side, you see what the traditional, the texts of yoga, ancient texts of yoga. Some texts of Patanjali Yoga Sutra was written in 7000 BC. So that old. Hatha Yoga was written perhaps around, 100 BC or something like that. Hatha Yoga Pratipika. So it's a very, very ancient text. And what are they saying? They are saying that by doing yoga, we unblock energy channels and allow free flow of prana and enhance pranic energy. I talked about that. What does it give you? It gives you fitness, flexibility, and strength. and your heart functions properly, your lungs function properly, your endocrinal system, your glands function properly, thyroid, this, that, everything functions properly. Your metabolic functions are good, right? Your digestive health is good. This is what the ancient texts claim. They say this is what they claim. They have not researched it, they just claim this. So modern researchers have studied the effect of yoga, and they have found that speed of activity increases, agility increases, reaction time increases, flexibility increases, balance increases, musculoskeletal strength is improved. They have cardiopulmonary function, endocrinal function, metabolic function, digestive functions have improved, and fatigue is reduced and inertia is reduced. So they're very much kind of in line with what the ancients said. Now, if you look at the cognitive domain, so you have again traditional claims. What are the traditional claims? What are they saying? They're saying the yoga channels the energy to the brain, it balances the left and the right brain, and it calms the mind. And as a result, you have attention, your mental dullness is removed, we balance the analytical and the imaginative ability, the left and right brain, and improve cognitive performance. And what does research say? They have researched and they have found this area is very heavily researched, because we all know that everybody thinks that the job of education is to develop the mind. So attention and concentration improves. Memory improves, both verbal and spatial. Speed of information processing improves. Intelligence goes up. Creative thinking improves. Abstract thinking improves. Again, the left and right brain balance. So again, very much in line with what the ancients said. If you look at the emotional domain, they say the same thing. What gives you the calming the mind gives you cognitive benefits. It also gives you emotional benefits. And what are the benefits? They said your anger, stress, anxiety will reduce. And you have greater self-control over your impulses and emotion. And what does modern research say? They say we have found reduction in mood disturbance, that is anger, anxiety, depression, hostility. These feelings have reduced. Stress is reduced. And there's improved self-esteem and self-regulation, a point Shana made when she made this beautiful presentation earlier. And finally, the personality domain. So traditional claims say that yoga reduces rajas and tamas, and it increases sattva. And what happens if that happens? We become tranquil, we are more enthusiastic, we are cheerful, our willpower improves, we have moral courage. And what does research say? Reduce what is called negative affects. These are measures of I'm feeling miserable, I'm feeling mad, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling sad. Those reduce. And positive affects improve. What is positive affects? I'm cheerful, I'm lively, I'm joyful, I'm proud. So here you are, enthusiasm, cheerfulness, all happens. And they found that the resilience improves. That means your willpower improves. Pro-social behavior, confidence improves. So you are more pro-social. You want to go out, meet others, talk to other kids. Okay. So these are the benefits of yoga. So based on all this work is a model which I have developed and published in a paper, which has, and a lot of people have appreciated it. Scholars have appreciated it. So this is a model which I made. This is too complicated to go through in any great detail, but very basically what I've said is to take yoga to schools. First, you have to create an enabling environment. You just can't say tomorrow, let's start yoga. You saw that in Ashtanga yoga, first you do yama, niyama, and then move on to practice of yoga. So to create an enabling environment, I've said moderate lifestyle. Shana also talked about that. And very simple things, good diet, work-play balance, regulate the time spent on media. Again, Shana talked about that on her own, right? Then transform the student-teacher relationship. I mean, a teacher has to be a role model. I mean, has to live the ethical values, the moral values, because children will copy what the teacher does or the parent does and not what they say. So this is very, very important. And third is parent involvement. Today, the system is such that parents are very concerned about the child's grades. My child has to go to IIT and has to get into medicine and blah, 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 all that stuff. And unless parents are involved, you involve them, you tell them that, we are going to pay attention to character and personality development along with academics. If they don't buy in, it's not going to work. So these are three things which are required to create an enabling environment. And the practice of yoga itself is asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana. So today in the modules that we develop is called what is called integrated yoga modules, which has some asana, some pranayama, some relaxation techniques, and some quiet time. Just chant Om, focus on Om for a minute, 2 minutes, right? And it works on body and mind. And body has the benefits which talked about. And when you work on the mind, calm the mind down, you have it has an automatic effect on cognition, emotion, and personality. So this is the model. And to translate the theory into practice, we have this. So schools say we don't do yoga, we do yoga only once a week, or we do a hobby class of yoga, is because it's too cumbersome to implement yoga. It requires a yoga room, yoga mats, it requires trained yoga instructors. So we can't do it. And we have too much pressure. There are too many activities going on. And we have very hard time to fit it. So under feasibility, first the school has to buy into that, we need to do something. Anything, you want to do something for building emotional resilience and character. And once they buy into that, then they have to make the trade-offs. What can I take out so that I can free half an hour every other day, at least every alternate day, if not every day, for yoga. Okay, and then the yoga practitioners will have to develop validated modules to fit into that time. So if they say, no, I can spare only 20 minutes, or I can spare only 30 minutes, whatever it is, then you have to make modules that fit into the time. The module which I tested was a 12-minute module and it worked. And the third thing is, you are telling the school that if you do yoga, all this benefits will happen. The school has to see those benefits. So there's to be research to show them that, your kids practice yoga for 6 months. And, this is before and after. So yoga module development becomes important. So you have to develop modules for small children, for, middle school level and high school level children, different modules, right? Those modules have to be tested. Has to be previously validated so that they work. And if you're doing yoga all over the school, then the role of the yoga instructor and the teacher has to be very clear. Because now you cannot, if everybody is doing every day, then the yoga instructor cannot take the classes. The teachers have to take the classes. So what's the role of the yoga instructor? Well, the yoga instructor will train the teachers. He or she will take kids, for one class a week to correct their practices. But the teacher has to take the load of teaching yoga. And if the teacher teaches yoga, he or she creates a very, very good learning atmosphere in the classroom. All right. Then there has to be research. All this, if schools implement, you research it to find out where the modules are working, what are the issues, what are the benefits, and finally, parents have to buy into it. Parents have to fully support it. Parents have to come, they encourage them to even participate or come and sit in the class when yoga is going on. So this is what is required, really required to take yoga into school. So to conclude, we have a very, very serious problem. Do not underestimate this problem. We have a very serious mental health problem and it's growing. We have a huge problem of character. I hear it from my friends, younger friends who have, high school going boys and girls. They're very, very serious character problems. Drug abuse is, when we were growing up, drug abuse was in college. Now it's gone to schools, 9th standard kids. So it's a very serious problem and something has to be done about this. And, we are sitting on this ancient wisdom of yoga. By practicing it, do nothing. There's nothing to be done. Just practice it and it will give you that benefit. So it's a very serious problem. And, as a society, the schools are also, reacting to parents as customers and, having riding and this and STEM education, all kinds of activities. The kid has no free time to sit and admire a rose. We have a very, very serious problem, and yoga has a very, very integrated overall solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul Sinha ji. That was quite informative. And something that comes to my mind listening to you is yoga does not transform the way I will see the things. However, it will transform who I am. So very, very good session. However, there will be many questions that, we will request you to answer. So for question answer session, can I invite Abhilasha? Abhilasha, welcome. Abhilasha is again a young, dynamic personality with us. All of 22, Abhilasha has tried many new things in life. At 13, she tried new business initiative at school, where she designed customized pen for school kids with their names engraved on it. Having studied in Waldorf School, she had a strong foundation of a holistic education with a balance of curriculum and liberal arts. At high school, she moved to an international school, Indus International, from where she was selected at American University, where she did 2 years of a bachelor's in business with papers on international relationship as well. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, she returned back and decided to stay back. She tried her hand at an entrepreneurial IoT venture, but realized it wasn't her cup of tea. A voracious reader, traveler, today she is in the process of starting her new interest and venture, which is creating a coffee cafe based culture which helps youngsters not just have coffee, but use the cafe to do much more productive work over a cup of coffee. So welcome Abhinasha. I will now hand it over to you and Atulji for question answer sessions.
Oh, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much, Mr. Atul, for your insightful and very useful tips on integrating yoga with our curriculum in schools today. Me coming from a Waldorf school, I have had the experience of having yoga taught to us as an extracurricular when I was a small child, and I think that's greatly benefited me when I look back today. Of course, even in an international school, it was implemented only on a in higher levels, high school, and it was also around exams, which really helped us calm our mind when preparing for the exams. Apart from that, I think a lot of what you said, and it's very intriguing when you see how the the culture, the yoga scriptures were written. Some you mentioned 9,000, 7,000 BC, and how relevant it is even today, and how modern research and modern sciences are actually proving the efficiency and efficacies of yoga today. It was very, very helpful, and I think it is also the need of the hour where you require children to, especially in today's condition, thanks to the pandemic, there is a lot of uncertainty for children who don't, especially high schoolers who have no idea. Like recently, we saw how kids were unaware of whether or not they'll be writing their board exams in the first place. That definitely creates a lot of anxiety for them, and also puts a heavy question mark on their future prospects of college. um, probably if yoga was taught to them back in school from a very young age, uh, they would have known better to handle the situation. And especially with everything being digital today, it's become important school they start practicing yoga, because with the internet there is a lot of unwanted content that they're also reaching, which is not only bad for them, but as you mentioned, it's also bad for the society that they're going to um, eventually create. With that, I would there was a question that was asked in the on the chat box when you were talking, and it was I think this is Shim, who's a young adult in his school in Delhi, who wants to know how we can make yoga interesting today for children.
Oh, what a lovely question. And I'm glad a school person has asked this question. So, again, going by ancient wisdom, small children up to the age of 7 or 8, they say should not practice yoga. And the reason is that small children by nature are outgoing. They're discovering the world around them. And yoga tends to make you a little more introverted. So that's not the right age to make children introverted. So small children should watch others doing yoga from the age of say 0 to about 7. They should watch other people, but not do it themselves. They should observe, like they're observing the world around them. They observe some people doing yoga, and somewhere it sticks in their memory, kind of a thing. So that is the recommendation. But today things have changed. So uh, yoga is then introduced in play. So the child is not told that you're doing Surya Namaskar or Vajrasana or this asana or that asana, but it's introduced as play. So there are special ways of doing it. And imagine that you're a butterfly. How does a butterfly flap? So you're flapping your legs like a butterfly. So it becomes very, very interesting for the child. Later on, from the age of 8 to about 10 or so, very light yoga. They say just do some chanting, do Surya Namaskar. That's enough, because again the body is growing. Don't do too much yoga at that point in time. Do very light yoga between 8 and 10. And then from 11 onwards, then you do the full, asana, pranayama, chanting, meditation from the age of 11 or 12. So, because kids also growing up, they have their growing bodies, and their bodies are weak when they're small, become stronger as they become like 14, 15, 16 years old. So the yoga module also follows their growth and fits in properly. So from no yoga to very light yoga to regular yoga as you go along. And for very small children, make it in play. I hope that answers.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I'm sure it does. Thank you, sir, for the answer. Now, I'd like everyone else, if anyone has any questions, to unmute themselves and pose any questions to sir of the time.
There is one more question on the chat. You can ask that too, from Shana.
So the question from Shana is, how does yoga act on our brain? Means, how does it help our mind to be more peaceful?
Okay, so it's very, very simple, Shana. If you are, let me give an example. Now, you, Shana, you are on a school bus and you're going to school, right? And in the bus, you are thinking, have I done my homework? What grade will I get? The teacher is going to give the test paper. Will I get good marks? Will I reach in time? So if those thoughts are going on in your head, if there are more thoughts in your mind, then you are stressed. It's very simple. Stress is equal to more thoughts. Calmness is equal to less thoughts. And complete peace is equal to no thoughts. It's as simple as that. So if you're going on a bus and you're looking out of the window and admiring the world around you, looking at other children in the bus, then your mind is calm. And this is what yoga does. Yoga always will bring you to the present moment. And why? Because you have no stress. Because when you were doing your homework, you did a very good job because you were concentrating on your homework. You're not thinking of what will the teacher say, am I doing it right? All that, the mind talk has stopped. Then you're just looking at whatever homework you have to do, whatever work you have to do, you're doing it extremely well. So it's done, it's finished. When you finished your work, now you sit down and have your dinner with your family and you're talking to them. There's no more homework on the dining table. It's just your parents and whatever conversation you're having. And when you're on the bus next morning, there's nothing. You're on the bus. So this is what yoga does. This is how yoga calms you down. As simple as that. And it makes it a habit. So you keep doing it every day, it becomes a habit. So I recall when I was a young man and my daughter, when she was in a play school in Bangalore, she was 4 years old or something, and I was chatting with her, the teacher the founder teacher in the play school, and I said, ma'am, I have this habit of sleeping late at night and waking up late in the morning. I wish I could wake up in the morning, but I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person. And she said, bullshit. All you have to do is wake up on an alarm for 7 days and your habit will change. And I actually followed her. And, after that, I was waking up. I saw the sunrise for the first time in my life, in my adult life. I mean, for the first time waking up. I mean, I've seen sunrise not sleeping, but first time I saw sunrise waking up. So it forms a habit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with that, we can open it up for the audience, our participants. Any questions, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
So can I add that the adults are also welcome to ask, because I think this is relevant for everybody.
And by the way, whatever benefits I have mentioned in my presentation applies to adults as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely applies to adults.
So you can raise your hands or you can just unmute. So can they, you can unmute, are they all muted? No, they can unmute themselves and they can ask. So we have a lot of kids and adults around, and please welcome to ask questions. Okay, so I will ask a question. So is it that there is a certain age at which it is easier to take on to yoga, and then after you cross a certain age, it becomes difficult, or it's okay, but you can take it on anytime?
First, it is, if you have not done yoga, it's okay to take on any time.
Okay.
Even when you're 80 years old, if you haven't done it, if you start doing it, it will give you benefit. Not as much as somebody who started doing yoga at the age of 8, but to compare to yourself, it will give you benefit. So don't think that I've become too old for yoga. Nobody is too old for yoga. Okay.
Okay.
So whatever age you are at, start yoga. So that is number one, and highly recommended. Start yoga, whatever age you are at. Number one. Number two, the right age to start yoga, according to Swami Satyananda of the Bihar School of Yoga, who's done a lot of work with kids, says 8 years is the right age.
Okay.
But I don't know, he wrote that quite a few years ago. But what's happening is that girls are maturing much faster now, So maybe the yogis need to relook at this and say, is it 6 years? What is it? So anyway, there's a certain age. I mean, like it could be 6, could be 7, whatever it is that the advanced yogis have to decide. But my feeling is that Satyananda's recommendation of 8 years needs to be relooked at, given what's happening, how kids are maturing much faster now. So that is one about starting of yoga. And if you start early, then, at a very physical level, your body is more flexible. You enjoy doing yoga more. Then if at an old age you start, your body is stiff. You can't bend, and at an older age, if you start and your body is stable, it'll take you years to get that flexibility. So if you start young, you just going through it, and even your personality, your emotions, your whatever cognition, the effects of yoga have already is in you if you started young. So net, I think it should start a little younger than 8 now, despite what Satyananda has said. Number one. Number two is whatever age you're at, do yoga. It will benefit you. Third is start as young as possible. And nowadays, people are saying do this, what is called integrated yoga. That means do asana, pranayama, together.
So what is the time that we have to spend on doing yoga per day? And second, what is the divide between the physical things, the exercises and the meditation part? What should be the divide in a day?
Okay. So I would say minimum 30 minutes, minimum
Mhm.
30 minutes, going up to at an hour.
Okay.
Beyond that, if you're a very serious yogi, then that's a different issue. But 30 minutes to an hour is the optimal time. Start with 30 minutes and slowly increase it, right? So that 30 minutes to begin with should have more asanas, because first you have to, you have to loosen up your body. You have to stabilize your body before you can do other things. So in the beginning, maybe just only do asanas in the beginning. And once the body, you should be able to feel that your digestion is good, your body is more flexible, your body is stable. So once that happens, then introduce maybe 5 minutes of pranayama, right? And later
That's
on,
right. That's the breathing, right?
breathing, yes, yes. The anulom vilom and
Belong.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're anybody interested, I can take a class on pranayama on Zoom. Very easily. Okay. And maybe 5 minutes of meditation. So if you were to get to a regime where you're doing 20 minutes of asanas, 5 minutes of pranayama, 5 minutes of meditation, it's very good to begin. Do that for a year. After that, you see. So now when I practice yoga, I do 2 hours a day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I do my pranayama and meditation for about 1 hour, and asanas and all for another 1 hour.
And what are the tangible benefits you have seen after you have started doing yoga?
In one word, my mind has calmed down. And in that, because my mind has calmed down, I accept life as it is. Whatever happens, something happens to my daughter, I say uska karma hai. हमने अपनी बेटी को जन्म दिया, कर्म नहीं दिया.
Okay.
So, you become more accepting of whatever is happening to you. You don't complain because, it's all you're doing. There's nobody to blame. So you go to work and your boss has been mean to you. It's not your boss's fault. I mean, that's your karma. It's everything is centered around you. You take full responsibility for your life.
Okay.
I mean, the benefits are huge. And you don't have to think about it. You just do yoga and it will happen. You don't have to do anything. Patanjali says, kuch nahi karna hai. Ye karoge to ye hoga. Bas. It's all science. Yoga is science. It's not a belief or a dogma, nothing. It's science. If you do this, this will happen. Just do yoga. And rest will follow. You will yourself know. And don't even think ki I'm doing this yoga for this benefit, that benefit. You do yoga. After a month, you just sit down and you say, Arey, This has happened to me. 6 months, oh, now see, my Abhilash is acting up and I'm fine. Okay. So this will happen automatically.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Abha, back to you.
So yeah, I'll just ask one question, right? Just to get the ball rolling, and also it's been on my mind for a while now. It's that so I do I'm a Vipassana practice,
Fantastic. Fantastic.
right?
Very good.
And my question is, so what's the difference exactly between Vipassana and yoga? Because from what I've heard, they're very, very similar. They're almost
No.
uh, synonyms to
Okay.
me.
So it's an excellent question. And since you studied in the US,
Hmm.
in the US, what they have done is they have distorted things. The US has
Right.
has a habit of distorting things because they have their mindset in anything is to deconstruct, right? While the mindset of in the East, anywhere in the East, I'm talking about India, China, anywhere, the traditional China, not the Maoist China, traditional China, is to synthesize, right? So there's a basic difference. So you give yoga to them, they will not look at the traditional text because there's no proof. It's somebody's word. They don't, the epistemology of experience is not valid for them. So they have separated meditation from yoga,
Hmm.
which is completely incorrect. You saw Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi.
Right.
So the first 5 limbs are external, Bahir Yoga it's called, Bahir Yoga.
Hmm.
And the next 3 limbs are internal, Antara Yoga. Okay. So meditation is the culmination of yoga. Raja Yoga is meditation.
Hmm.
Culmination of yoga is meditation. And Vipassana is an ancient tantric technique which the great Bhagwan Buddha popularized in his time. And it has kind of come back to India after we lost it. And it's a I have personally not done it. I've known people who have done it, but it's a beautiful technique. So I'm very glad that you have done Vipassana and continue to do so. It will benefit you in your life.
Right. Because when you were saying that, through your yoga, through your practice of yoga all these years, you come to realize that you're more present in the now,
Hmm.
right? Um, in a more simpler way
Hmm.
to say that if something happens, it is you say karma, but right, you say karma, but in Vipassana, it's more that if something has happened,
Hmm.
it has happened, right? I cannot continue
Hmm.
laminating over it because it's just a waste of energy. You are taught to practice being staying in the now,
Excellent.
and that is how even yoga, from what I've heard from you, is meant to be.
Yes, yes. So these are so the one is the the whole science of yoga, which for which Patanjali is the greatest saint of yoga. He didn't invent yoga, by the way.
Hmm.
Yoga
Hmm.
existed in the Puranas, and it said that the yoga originally Shiva taught Parvati yoga.
Mm.
So he didn't invent yoga; already existed in the books, but Patanjali is the one who put it together. So he
Okay.
became its saint, uh, and so he in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, not one asana is given. There is no mention of Surya Namaskar, nothing. But it's all about if you do yoga, kya hoga, what will happen to your mind, to your body, what will happen. That is the what powers you'll get, what is nirvana, what is moksha. So he talks about that. And there are so after that, from Patanjali Yoga, so there are many schools came.
Hmm.
So Vipassana is one school. It's based on Tantra and the Buddhist Tantra. And then there is Hatha Yoga. There are many Gheranda Samhita. There are many other forms of yoga. Then in more recent times, Krishnamachari, he popularized yoga in about 150, 200 years ago. And from there's a Mysore school. There is the Krishnamachari Yoga Mandala from Chennai, Bihar School of Yoga. So different people are saying, but it's basic, the funda is the same. Everybody has added their own techniques and their own methods, but the basic funda is unchanged. They're being true to yoga. Can't say that same thing for the US in many ways, but because they see yoga more as a physical exercise, which it is not. But be that as it may, even they are benefiting. So who am I to judge? If they want to consume, if you want to consume hamburger with a fork and a knife, who am I to complain? Okay.
Right.
So if they want to consume yoga that way, but they're also benefiting.
Right.
Okay. So it's fine. Ultimately, once they evolve to a level, they will come back. They will read Patanjali, and they'll know what it is. They'll read Buddhism, and they'll know what Vipassana is.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I'm very glad that you're doing Vipassana at this age. Very, very glad. Very good for you.
It's benefited me greatly.
Get your mom to do it also.
I've been convincing her. I've been talking to her, but
Absolutely, get your mom to do it. There are
it's,
centers around Hyderabad, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, there's one about 2 hours away. So
Probably today she'll be inspired to do it.
Yeah, others, any questions? Please unmute and ask.
Okay, I think, Atulji, you have taken this session so beautifully, covered it widely, and Abhilasha, your questions were also, enlightening more into the topic. So if you don't have another question, probably we move on.
if there isn't one, I'd like to ask one more.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about how to integrate yoga into today's schools and the curricula. So my question is, unfortunately, yoga has somehow been associated to religion, which is also again a reason why there is resistance to incorporate it into the curriculums of schools. How do we disassociate religion with yoga so that it is more widely acceptable, because the benefits are that matter, and the yoga is greatly benefiting people who will practice it. So how can we ensure that yoga as is, without any religious boundaries, be incorporated into schools?
Okay. First thing is that we have to understand this whole thing about this is religious and this is secular is a very Western idea. It is very prevalent in Christianity, most 100%, that this is religion, and the split between the state and the church, which happened in the 17th century, is the cause of that. But when you look at the East, and I'm not talking only about India, I'm talking about India, the whole of Asia, China, not the communist China, but the traditional China. Religion, philosophy, way of life are all integrated. And religion, unlike Christianity and Islam, is not dogmatic over here. It doesn't say, here, this is the book, believe it, don't ask questions. Here it was always seek, ask questions, understand, practice. It was, religion is equal to spirituality. All right. So this thing about disassociating yoga from religion is a very dangerous trend. If you disassociate from it, then in years to come, people will forget what it is. It will be like an alternative to going to the gym or doing Zumba. What is the purpose of Vipassana? The whole spirituality will be gone. So do not separate it. So people are mature enough to understand what yoga is, but yes, you can be culturally sensitive. So for example, the people in the Middle East are doing yoga. All right. But you can be culturally sensitive to say that, okay, we will have no Om chanting. Okay. Om chanting has a lot of benefits. Just because I mentioned it, I'll mention it to you. There was research done in a university in Uttar Pradesh, I forget which one, where they made people chant Tom, which sounds very similar to Om, and Om. And Tom had no benefits. And Om had all the benefits. The research neurologically, put nodes, all that stuff, and they researched it. And Om had the benefits. So there's something to Om. So Om is the universal, is the cosmic vibration. And when you chant Om, you tune your vibration with the cosmic vibration.
That's right.
So there's harmony. All right. But if somebody doesn't want to take it, don't force it. It's good enough that somebody from some other culture, some other religion has said, I want to do yoga. It's good. Let's start with that. Make them do asanas, make them do pranayama. Don't ask them to chant Om, nothing. So that's the way, but don't disassociate it. Disassociating is more dangerous than saying this is it, but the way we'll do it, there's nothing, you can see the come and see the practice for yourself. There's nothing secular about bending down and touching your toes or breathing in and out from your nose. I'm not asking you to say, believe in Jesus and do this, pray to Jesus and do this. I'm not asking you to do anything. Just come. Come with the mat and do. Like you go to a gym, like you do Zumba, you do it. But the fact is that yoga is the goal of yoga is samadhi. The goal of yoga is to merge your Atman with Brahman. That's the goal of yoga. That you cannot dissociate. If you dissociate, then this whole distortion happens, which is dangerous. Now, one more thing I want to tell you. I had the same impression, and when I did my research, and I did my research in school in Bangalore. And that school had, in its neighborhood, it had a kind of a Muslim colony. So there were a lot of Muslim kids. Each class had about 5, 6 Muslim children. They all did yoga. They all chanted Om. And one day I was in the school, my research was going on, and a mother, a Muslim mother, because of her dress, she was wearing a burqa. And she said, she came to me and asked me if I was the yoga person. And I said, yes. So she said, my daughter told us about you. Very good. Please make them do. I'm very happy that you're doing yoga. So there is also an acceptance with the World Yoga Day and all that stuff. There's acceptance of what yoga is. So do not hide its antecedents. Do not hide where it comes from. But people can consume it in a way which doesn't hurt the sentiments. So if I were to do pranayama and I have a mixed group of people, I say, we will do some Om chanting now. And if you don't want to chant Om, please just close your eyes and remain silent. Most people do chant Om. Om has now is slowly becoming more secular.
Okay. Thank you.
And Surya Namaskar is just a name. You're not praying to the sun or something. It's just a name. It's a name of a pose. That's it. So it's a big ado about nothing. You call it sun salutation, fine. If you like that, call it that. How does it matter? So don't be dogmatic about yoga. Also, we are not dogmatic people, and we are saying yoga has benefits. It is spiritual, but you can de-link it. You can do it in a way you want. Don't chant Om if you don't want to chant Om. That's fine. Only Om chanting is the only sticky thing, or doing Namaskar, the only sticky thing.
Also, I think there's a difference between religion and spirituality, right? So yoga is more spiritual. It's, of course, it is associated also with the religion, but it's more to do with general spirituality.
But every Eastern, what you would call religion, whether it's Sikhism, Buddhism, Hinduism, they're all spiritual. So all of East spirituality is religion, because there was total freedom. The question our ancestors asked is, where do I come from? Where do I go? What is that? Is my body real or something else is real? These are questions they asked. And there was no dogma. There was no thing to believe. This is, you have to believe in God. We have 12 systems of philosophy. 4 of them are atheistic. Did you know that? Jainism is atheistic. Samkhya is atheistic. Vaisheshika is atheistic. Buddhism is agnostic. So belief in God was not a requirement at all. You want to believe, believe. Don't want to believe, don't believe. There was the philosophy called Charvak. Khao piyo mauj karo. Bhagwan kuch nahi hai, heaven nahi hai, or hell nahi hai. It's a accepted philosophy. Charvaks. So there was total freedom of religious thinking over here. In fact, even in the ancient Greek culture, all those cultures are lost, so we don't. Only the Indian culture survives. But the ancient Greeks. So what the West has done is they have removed the Plato and Aristotle philosophy from the pagan religion. They were all religious.
Yeah.
They removed it to make it acceptable. This is what I mean, Abhilash. If you remove yoga from the religion, this is what will happen. And as Indians, we have to fight to say no. Yoga is very much part of our spiritual tradition. Otherwise, it will become like Plato's and Aristotle's philosophy with no link to life and living. It just becomes an intellectual exercise. So yoga will become a total, just pure physical exercise like gym and Zumba and whatever else. So as Indians, this is our heritage. We have to say no. Yoga is based on spirituality. You can consume it whichever way you want. That's your choice. But yoga is spirituality.
Yeah. So back to Jane, I think. Jane, I think.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Quite interesting question answers as well. And, I'm sure it has made all of us think again about whatever we had as a perspective in terms of yoga and its usefulness in our life. So now I would request Nandita Sethi to give a vote of thanks. Nandita Sethi is a founder and MD of the Entrepreneur Zone, which is an entrepreneurship development center and a startup accelerator, providing mentorship and consultancy to startups and businesses. She has a doctorate in international economics, and in her 28 years of experience, she has trained several top to middle level management on global markets, business environment, corporate reforms, marketing trends, strategy and leadership, entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. She has authored the book The Asia Pacific Region, Emerging Opportunities for India, and edited the books Global Meltdown, Regional Impacts and Rethinking India's Growth Strategy, Services versus Manufacturing. Since 2015, she is mentoring a consulting startup and budding entrepreneurs through her organization TEZ, which runs programs to help startup and SMEs. She is mentor for TIE, GIT, ISB, TEP, CII, IWN, UOH, ICRISET, WebHub, etc. She has been awarded the Best Mentor Award in 2016-17 in the TIE ISB Connect, the Indiewood Business Excellence Award in November 19, and COWE Excellence Award in March 21. She is the past chairperson of CII, Indian Women Network 2019-20, Telangana, which helps women professionals and entrepreneurs. She is also a TEDx speaker. Her organization, the Entrepreneurship Zone, has been adjudged as the top 10 startup consultant organizations in India, Silicon India, November 9, 2016-17. Many startups have taken mentorship from TEZ and have launched their businesses. Today, her mission is to integrate entrepreneurship training deeply into existing educational system so that we can see more startup activities on campuses and create a culture and thinking which is highly entrepreneur in nature. So over to you, Nandita, for vote of thanks as well as an anthem.
Jane,
Anthem
and
for Sena.
sorry for the thank you, Jane, and sorry for the long profile reading. I should have cut it short.
It was pleasure reading about you, and I'm sure everyone loved reading about that.
I didn't mean to. It was just ready, so I just sent it. So sorry about that. Too long. Okay, so I think this was one of the most wonderful sessions I have attended, and the topic and the content of the session was as calm as the session was. First time there was so much of silence, and everybody was. It was like as if we were undergoing, yoga ourselves. So first of all, let me thank everybody in the session first for having this wonderful session. So my thanks go out to Jane Shah for giving a wonderful welcome address, background to the event and the talk, and putting it in the right context. Shana, you were simply superb. At your age, your keynote address was something, was so beautifully put together. All the points of view from a child's point of view, from an adult's point of view, what they should do and what a child should do. You put it together so precisely in your presentation. Shana, you did a great job. Atulji, of course, your talk was superb. My opening statement was that we felt we were going through yoga, and that speaks volumes about the way you handle the session. So thanks about that. And definitely we have 5 minutes, so I would just like to wrap up also what he said. And very quickly, he took us through developing the mind is the primary goal of education. And there is too much stress on academics for children, and the focus on a holistic growth is missing in today's world, leading to humongous mental health issues, deteriorating the character of children, all very pertinent points. And he gave an advocacy for character education and to observe the goals of ancient Indian education, where building the character, personality, social efficacy, and preservation of heritage were paramount in our ancient system. He also took us through a case for yoga, where he said yoga can bring about social, emotional learning, SEL, and how this can reduce the pressure on children, which has been brought about by globalization, the pressure to succeed, media distractions, cyberbullying, too much of gadgetry in the hands of children. So yoga comes as a balancing between the physical and the mental energies of children. And also it helps the teacher and the student to do, if they do it together, to have better learning outcomes. He also told us about how yoga works to understanding the mind and bringing calmness in the mind. And he connected the body, energy, mind, intellect, and bliss. The three energies, which was so beautifully brought about, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Yoga brings an increase.
ଯୋଉ ମିଟିଂ ର ଆଇଡି ପଠେ ତା ଝିଅ ଏଠି କଣ ଅଛି ତ ଏ ସବୁ ନନ୍ଦିତା ସେଠି ଅତୁଲ ସିହ୍ନା ଜନନ ବାବାର ନା ଅତୁଲ ସିହ୍ନା ଅତୁଲ ନା କିଏ ବେ ଗୋଟା ଏଟା ସବୁ କଣ ଏଣ୍ଟରପ୍ରେନ୍ୟୁର
Pratima ji, will you please mute yourself?
अबे प्रतिमा କହିଲା ପା ମ୍ୟୁଟରେଷ୍ଟଲ
Pratima, can you just unmute can you just mute yourself? Yeah. Yeah, so the sattva increases, the rajas and tamas decrease. Am I right? And that really helps in opening up the nadis and helps in bringing about the action and fitness in a person. And he finally ended it with a very beautiful model, which he has himself developed, and to show how this can be integrated in the school system and how schools can become enablers, and they have to prepare themselves for a complete setup of yoga in their schools by seeing the benefits that this can bring to children. So I think the whole plethora of what is yoga to how it can be implemented was brought about very beautifully by Atulji. Thank you so much for bringing the entire thing in this short program. Thanks to Abhilasha for moderating the Q&A session, and thanks to all the audience who have been, I think, extremely calm in listening to this session. And I think it's brought about a kind of solace and calmness to everybody here. So you have also been great audience. So thank you, everybody. Some are children. Children, thank you for making this happen. You did a great job. And children's parents also are here. So thank you all. Some of them are not Zenam members, but you have come in today. So thank you all for being a part of the session for me. Thanks. Yes, I think I need to play the anthem now.
Yes,
And
Nandita.
yes, can I get the host?
We will,
I'm the
yeah,
host,
you
okay.
are the host. I
Yeah.
would also like to thank Rajiv Anandji for
Oh, yes,
creating this wonderful platform. So we are all together interacting and doing some or the other contribution to the community. I would prefer if Rajiv Anandji can say few words before we play the anthem.
Sure. He's always the silent,
Yeah, somebody need to
invisible
push him.
person, so we forget.
No. I'm just playing the actual role of whatever Atul Bhaiya said today. I'm in that meditative mode. So I think that is how I will summarize. Please proceed. Yeah.
That's beautiful summary, in fact. Thank you.
Yes,
Nandita.
Nandita, you
Would
can
you
go
like-
ahead with the anthem.
Okay, okay, just a minute. Please tell me if you can see.
Yes, we can see.
सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा हम सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा कष्ट गरीबी दुख हरने का हम संकल्प उठाए धरती को कुटुंब करने के लिए प्रयास बढ़ाए कष्ट गरीबी दुख हरने का हम संकल्प उठाए धरती को कुटुंब करने के लिए प्रयास बढ़ाए हम सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा सबको रोजी रोटी हो और सबको हो खुशहाली हो निर्बाध विचार भावना सदा सीखने वाली सबको रोजी रोटी हो और सबको हो खुशहाली हो निर्बाध विचार भावना सदा सीखने वाली हम सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा दया क्षमा नैतिकता हो और हो सम्मान सभी का सबको यूं अपना माने के दिल ना दुखे किसी का दया क्षमा नैतिकता हो और हो सम्मान सभी का सबको यूं अपना माने के दिल ना दुखे किसी का हम सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा हम सदस्य जीनत है जीना परिवार हमारा चारों ओर खुशी फैलाने का है अपना नारा
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
a second. I'm sharing. Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you, Nandita, for playing the anthem. Thank you, everyone, for attending the session. finally, we would end by saying, fall in love with taking care of yourself, your mind, your body and spirit, and yoga is a way for it. Thank you, everyone. And you please, all of you, take good care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great thing is we are bang on 6.
Yes.
Absolutely on time. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.